Hare Krishna, everyone. Today I'm taking another question, a really good one that came in from one of you in the audience. And this one has to do with deceased loved ones. So, this beautiful letter, I'm going to read it anonymously. I am always trying to think of Krishna every moment of every day and keep him fixed in my mind. I feel generally pretty unattached to things, and I'm sort of just looking forward to going home to him after this lifetime, I hope. But there's one thing, one sort of material desire that just eats at me, and it's the hope of seeing my deceased grandfather again. He was amazing, and we were so close throughout my life, but he passed away during a time when I couldn't really be there, and I just think about him a lot and wish that I could just see him one more time. Before finding the Bhakti path, I studied Jnana Yoga for a number of years, so I know it's foolish to lament these sort of material kinships, but I just miss him so much. I've always believed I'll see him again when I die, but now I've grown concerned because my desire to stay focused on Krishna, especially when I quit this body, might inhibit me from being able to have that reunion I long for with my grandfather. I feel like Krishna is so loving and compassionate that, of course, he would let me see my pop before I would go on to Krishna Loka. Maybe it's silly for me to even think I could get out of the material world this time around, but I've minimized my entanglements, have no children, and I grew up in a situation that ensured I wouldn't be too attached to this material world. What if pop is the only thing that keeps me tied to all of this? It's sort of a technical question. I know the scriptures can get pretty technical, so I was just hoping you might have some insight into this kind of thing. I felt like you'd be the best person to ask. You have such a great way of explaining these complicated philosophical concepts. I guess my background in Jnana Yoga would tell me that we're all connected and I shouldn't long for his presence because in a way he's still with me, but I'm just having trouble with this. Ugh, I'd say I feel overwhelmed. But I just listened to your talk on the Pisces new moon, so I won't feel overwhelmed. Thank you so much. What a beautiful email and what a completely understandable position, right? I mean, I think that it would be, not only would it be inhuman, but it would be, I don't think at all in line with the kind of love that Krishna embodies for us to say that you shouldn't grieve for or feel the loss of or miss another soul. Because what is another soul? Another soul is another spark of Krishna. So the thing that I would remember that might help you shift. And if I were you and I were in your position, I don't know what I would feel. So maybe I couldn't do this, you know? But the thing that comes to my mind is, let's take my own deceased grandmother. She died a few years ago. I haven't quite had the same, attachment. I wasn't as close, I don't think, as it sounds like you are or were to your grandfather. But I am, if I think about my grandmother, she was so witty and smart. And if I think, well, did I love her and that she was witty and smart? Yes, I did, because as a spirit soul, those are her unique qualities. Those are qualities that belong to her somehow. They express her unique swarup, her unique spiritual form on some level that will eventually evolve, I would guess. Who knows how people change too as they keep growing in faith. But if I can remember that her intelligence and her wittiness and her good sense of humor are minuscule expressions of Krishna, that Krishna is the source of all opulences, whether that's beauty or smarts or wits or cleverness or humor or warmth or generosity or kindness, or, even if it's like, I remember my grandpa's hug. Any good hug is a hug that is made in the image of Krishna. And by that, what we mean is that anything that is good, beautiful, and true has its origins in our divine source. And so perhaps one of the things to do when you're remembering your grandpa is not to scold yourself like I shouldn't remember him or long for him, but is rather to just keep telling your mind that what I'm really longing for is communion in the soul with those qualities. And those are Krishna's qualities. Krishna gave me those most adorable, charming, lovable, warm qualities in my pop as a way of understanding who Krishna is, and as a way of understanding, God speaks to us through other people. In the Bhagavatam, there's an actual part of a piece of the Bhagavatam where someone's inquiring about why, kind of like, what's missing? Why am I not getting bhakti? And they're like, the answer is like, well, unless you're able to see God in everyone, until you're at that point, you won't be able to do bhakti. And I think that the more that we're able to see God in not just people, but in all things, in all events, in all themes in life, the losses, the good character qualities, the character struggles, that if we see them in light of the perfect Leela, we see them in light of all of the perfect forms that are captured in the most attractive personality of Krishna as our meditation, then we can appreciate that attachment. That attachment becomes attachment to Krishna, because I'm attached to all the good qualities of my grandfather that are just little minuscule, images of Krishna that Krishna has given me in my life to help me on my faith path. Thank you, Grandpa, for being a source of all of these qualities that I loved so much, that I recognize as the qualities of God. Because any good qualities are God's qualities, So if we can dovetail it like that, I think it helps. And not to chastise ourselves, like, well, he's just a human. It was just a grandfather. It wasn't in a spiritual category. It's like it becomes spiritual we spiritualize it through the way we remember it, through the way we relate to a person. I don't think it's whether or not we have our grandfathers on our mind when we pass that determines if we, go home. I think that's too strict. I think what matters is that, we've learned to understand that the things we love, that are of any value or of any real goodness are aspects of God. And so the God in us, in people, in the world, in spirit souls, and the transcendent person of Krishna, that there's a connection there. I sometimes wonder as a parent, what would I ever do if I lost one of my children? Like, God forbid. Like, that's probably the scariest thing I could think of. And it feels a lot of the time like this bad attachment that I have to my kids. I deal with that in my head going, I shouldn't be so attached that I'm worried about their death, worried that my life would be over if they died. I mean, like that. And we're told all throughout the Bhakti scriptures not to form unhealthy attachments to family, to money, to our bodies, to so many things. But there is another kind of attachment, like my Gurudev always says, our hearts are like a phone that's always looking for a Wi-Fi signal to connect with. And if we're not learning how to connect the heart to, we're not finding the signal in everything and everyone, if we're not finding a creative opening in the love and fear that I feel for my children, if I don't so what I do is I say, that fear that I have that they'll die and that I'll be nothing, that is just a little sliver of what, of what Yashoda Mataji feels for Krishna. That's just a little sliver of what the gopis and cowherd boys feel for Krishna. That's just a little tiny sliver of what the people in Vrindavan feel for Krishna. That sense of, oh my God, if I lose these little beams of light, like, what will I be? And I don't have the ability to feel that way about God yet. But if I can remember that love that I feel for my children, that fear, that worry that I feel, it's not just some material perversion or attachment that I have to get rid of. It's the right feeling. It just has to continually be dovetailed until gradually I learn to feel that same love for God and for all things. And so I celebrate that I can feel that kind of love. And I recognize that it's baby Krishna in my little girls, that is the true source of what I find so beautiful and attractive about them. It's the only thing that anything that I have that's worth anything in me that other people might like or grow attached to. I would want them to not get attached to me, but to somehow see Krishna in it, so that, because the best thing about Krishna is, what do we say about Krishna Loka? You mentioned Krishna Loka. What do we say about, the spiritual sky? What do we say about being with God? Is that it's a place of wonderment, because God's beauty is increasing without end. So it's like you can't ever look at God without God's beauty intensifying and expanding. And so, part of how it expands is in my opinion, in my humble experience, is it expands by allowing it to expand through authentic feelings. Anytime we have an authentic emotion, if we try to bring it back and reflect upon how it has its origin in divinity, all feelings do, all good qualities do, all of the challenging qualities do as well. And those are harder to deal with. But certainly when it comes to the loss of a loved one, the best way to be reunited with a loved one is to recognize that God is the source of your loved one and the source of all good qualities that your loved one has. There was a movie that came out called Contact a long time ago with Jodie Foster. And when she went to another world to meet aliens, they took the form of her father because they believed that that would be the form that would feel safest to her. And I think God is like that too. I don't think you need to get rid of the memories of Pop Pop. Instead, I think you can imagine that, it's in all likelihood, if you keep dovetailing your feelings for your grandfather into divine love, if you spiritualize those feelings and honor them and sanctify them, rather than making them about yourself or loss or grief or something temporal, if you spiritualize them, then the grief, as well as the good memories and all of the good qualities, all of it it's the exact way that Krishna starts taking on a form that can speak to you. Krishna speaks to us through our spiritualizing of those kinds of things. It's just like the alien taking on a form that works for us. Krishna is so loving that Krishna can start to speak to you through you spiritualize the feelings you have for your grandfather. Suddenly you start to see Krishna in your grandfather, And that's what Krishna wants us to do. He puts those people in our lives in every situation in our life because he wants us to do that. All of these people appearing in our lives are manifestations of Krishna. So if we trust that and learn to see things like that little by little, then it's never a question of eliminating attachments. It's a question of learning to feel God and see God in all things. And this is, for many people, the biggest impediment to bhakti, is that we think of God only as above or transcendent and in another world. And we forget that Krishna Loka is here. There's people who are walking in the spiritual world, right here on earth too. It's because, as far as my Gurudev has taught, they're learning to see Krishna in all things. So spiritualize the connection, sanctify it, bless it, be thankful for it. Thank Krishna for the longing and complicated feelings that you have, and try to imagine the allegorical way in which, the gopis are present in that longing, or Mother Yashoda is, or, and I think that can help. So really good question and really heartfelt. So I hope that this has been helpful. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I've thought about things, I've had some similar thoughts, and these are kind of the conclusions that I've come to. So feel free, anyone, if you have questions, to email them, info@nightlightastrology.com, with Bhakti Q&A in the subject line. Okay, well, on that note, this has given me some good insight, because my uncle just had a stroke, and he's paralyzed now for the rest of his life on one half of his body, they think. And there's so many of his qualities that he plays guitar. There's so many things that I won't see and I won't experience from him anymore. And I've just come to, I think I need to take the same advice and really cherish that the qualities that I loved so much in him are not gone, that they are qualities of Krishna, as is, there's a movie called Fierce Grace. It was about Ram Dass, and he had a stroke, and he talked about how, even the deformity of his body that happened, and his inability to move on some side. And he started seeing the hand of God in that place in his body. And So God's present in death too, and in loss and in grief, and that's the hardest place to really accept it. But how many stories are there in the Bhagavatam and the Gita of lamentation? There's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. So we have to learn how to sing lamentation rather than feel like it's a thing that's happening to us. We have to learn how to, God likes minor keys as well. So we've got to figure out how to sing those songs too and find God in them. All right. Anyway, so I hope this is helpful and I hope you have a beautiful day. Take it easy. Hare Krishna.